Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your lunch break. Just as a reminder, my name is Brady Roberts, and I'm facilitating on behalf of FMCS this afternoon. So I want to jump right into where we left off the AM session and just briefly recap where we are. So we took and heard a lot of red lines and proposals the first 2 weeks. And the result of those solicitations is what you have in front of you today, issue paper number 10 on IDR. Consistent with the process as we set it out, I'd like to now move us to do a consensus check and see everyone's thumbs. If we are in fact in consensus, great. And if not, I'm going to ask folks to come off of mute and add any new proposals that would move them from a thumbs down to a sideways thumb. But before that, I see Joe, your hand, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Brady. Just a process question. If we consensus check now, does that commit us to moving on from IDR?
So consistent as to how we've handled the first, I think, 4 at this point consensus checks, we would then move on to what's next on the agenda, which is PSLF, the first issue of PSLF, and then time permitting, we would circle back to IDR at the end of the week.
So I'm going to go ahead and say I don't think we should move on from IDR. So if a consensus check means moving on, I don't think we should do that. I think there are large outstanding issues here, and there is a red line that some of us have been working on. A big group of people discussed it, and I think it would be productive, personally, to put it up and walk through it. And I think that's like consistent with a good faith process here. So that's what I would propose. I don't think we should move on from this topic yet. It's a very important topic. It ties into PSLF, and I think we should address it further.
Understood. Jennifer, I saw your hand. Do you want to quickly respond on behalf of the department? Otherwise, I'll just go down the hands that I see.
Sure, Brady. I was actually going to respond to the idea about moving on. And just to clarify that, just because we take the consensus check doesn't mean that we wouldn't be revisiting the issue. But if this is the red line that was submitted earlier, we did take it into consideration. But I mean, I'm certainly amenable to walking through it if you prefer to do that. But to date, all the proposals that we received on IDR, some of which was, brought up again at this session, we did take it under consideration. So everything that we've received thus far, we've taken it, we've thought about it, we've tried to consider it, we've gone back and forth with it, and this is where we landed. That being said, I'm certainly open to, if you want to go line by line, language by language, we can do that.
Right. So I guess, Joe, I have a question for you. Will this be language that much of the committee will be seeing for the first time?
So we had a caucus in between sessions with a big group, and we met again last Monday when the department's language came out. It got dropped into a Word doc. It does not have any of my proposals in it, so I haven't sent it to the department. I don't know if somebody else did. Personally, I think it would be productive to do some line by line. We haven't done any. I think it's been done in negotiated rulemakings in the past, and I'm just afraid if we move on, we're not gonna get back to it because there's so much on the table here, and I think this is an important topic.
Gotcha. Michaela, go ahead.
Yeah, and I want to first clarify, Joe, you're talking about line by line of what the department has proposed, correct? Or are you talking about line by line of a different proposal?
Well, I'm talking about and if people don't want to do that, I'm just trying to get us to where we're working through some of this. So I'm talking about the document Marjorie created on Monday after we got the new language. That said, if we want to.
No, I just wanted to clarify that I was
document like that,
So I also want to reiterate the concern that, like, if we take consensus right now, that we won't get back to this, right? Unless we're having some kind of commitment saying that this would be the first topic we'd come back to. But with so many topics potentially not reaching consensus, there's no way that we would know that this would be able to come back and what that would look like. And this affects, like, yeah, I understand it's tied to PSLF, but arguably, like, PSLF is for a smaller portion of IDR participants, right? IDR is a huge program. And then a couple specifics. One, I know this is super low on the agenda, like on the priority list, but like, could we please rename it? Calling it EICR is so problematic. We already have IDR, we have ICR, IBR, like they all blur together. And so when we want to incentivize participation into something, calling it like such an obscure name is like really difficult, right? So if we could, I have like a whole list, mostly from Reddit. Also, I think I submitted one. I really like calling it the BEAR plan. I also like student loan affordability plan, which is SLAP, but you know, it's questionable. And then also, like, you know, we on substantive, like, again, lowering forgiveness time, or if we want to focus low balance borrowers, finding some way to have either, like, you know, folks who have had zero or certain payment for a certain amount of time. But I also propose like a sign-on bonus, right? That if the question, and with the contingency, if there isn't the authority to do like partial forgivenesses as like Persis' plan had, if we could just do $10,000 of forgiveness under IDR, IECR, whatever we're gonna call it. Please, can we rename it though?
Jen, I see your hand.
So yes, we're still taking suggestions on the name as far as I know. So feel free to send those forward, Michaela. I may have spoke too soon. I didn't realize that this is a proposal that we haven't seen, and that might be. I mean, we may have some reservations about doing, you know, if it's, because I just don't know how fruitful that would be. I would need to take this back to others. So I wouldn't be able to respond very fruitfully to a proposal that we haven't seen yet.
Right, and I think that might be where some of the value in taking a consensus check would be, is that it would give all negotiators on this committee time to consider new proposals, and then again with the expectation we have time at the end of the week to come back. But Marjorie, go ahead.
So I was just going to ask if we could just go ahead and do the line by line read through, and I think for those of us that have worked on the proposal, we could simply refer to it when making suggestions or asking clarified questions. I think we've made very clear sort of our big picture issues, and it might be easier to point specific points in the regulatory language to then either offer suggestion or get very specific clarity as to what's been provided by the department so far.
I got you. Bethany, go ahead.
I was just going to explain or suggest exactly what Marjorie had to say, because I think doing it that way will also give the department a very clear sense of where I think all the negotiators have consensus and think the department should revisit the proposal. And so I would hope that it would also be helpful for the department.
Gotcha. So Jennifer, I'm open to hear your thoughts on this. And just to clarify, Marjorie, this would be the line by line that Joe and some other negotiators have been working on, or is this the existing?
No, what the department provided.
I see. Okay.
I apologize. Can you repeat that one more time? The proposal that on the table is to go through the language, the proposed language for IDR.
From what the department provided, I think, so we sort of talked about it broadly, right? We went through it in chunks. So I think now there are several of us who feel that it might just be helpful to actually go through the language and just have the conversation based specifically on the written language in what the department initially shared.
Sure.
Brady, you sound like a robot at the moment. So Michaela, let me go ahead and call on you.
Underwater robot. So I was just gonna say that I think it was really important that we did that big picture because we wanted to see if this was a negotiation. So I know that they're like, I feel bad, Jennifer, because you went to go line by line and we were like, no, and now we're like, yes. But I do think it was important that we did have that time to kind of like air our 30,000 foot view issues. And then now we can go into a deep dive. So I just want to like fully support what Marjorie says, but also like give you the support. And I recognize that that's what you started with. But I think both were really important.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that. I'm happy to accommodate. It's a lot of ideas, and I know that we've kind of gone back and forth, and we've talked a lot about it, a lot of issues. So I'm happy, I'm happy to go through the text again if that's helpful for people.
Okay, so is the thought that we should pull up the document as it was proposed by the department, walk through that in terms of language and see what suggestions, thoughts, and ideas folks might have as we walk through the reg text? I think that's what I'm hearing. If that's the case, Vanessa, could I ask that you share the document up on the screen? And if we can scroll to the top, and it looks like we are near there now. Perfect, thank you. Let me open it up to the group as we walk through this section by section. Who would like to help us begin? Michaela?
Can we please change the name now? Because that's the first thing that comes up. I'm sorry, it was the appropriate time. It's so line by line. It says the expanded income contingent repayment. I worked really hard on acronyms. I know, I'm sorry, I keep showing you on my notebook, but like I had a whole like list of words that we could use. So far, I think the ones that are most appropriate is probably bear or slap. I kind of really like slap, but I know that some people might find that to be a negative connotation. But like it slaps, like it's like it can be a positive slang. But like, how would we go about that? Like proposing a name? Could it be bear? Borrower's earnings adjusted repayment? Yeah.
Well, we just add a comment bubble on the name, and then throw some suggestions in there.
All right, before I ask for name suggestions, am I still a robot, or have I?
You're good, Brady, go ahead.
All right, great. So I heard bear and slap. I would also encourage folks to utilize the chat box if they have any other suggestions. And then, Michaela, did you want to note anything else, or is it okay to move on to Persis?
It's okay to move on. I was just hoping that we could have that
Great.
name change.
Yeah, Persis, go ahead.
So I put this in the chat, but I'm still going for ABC, affordable budget conscious repayment. But that's actually not why I raised my hand. Just have thoughts on all the things. So this is, I guess maybe this is a little bit below here as we're talking about family size. I think that's kind of the next thing on the screen. And then just to note that, in our previous conversations, it seemed like there was actually pretty general consensus amongst all the non-federal negotiators that we wanted for married borrowers who file separately, we wanted it to file the ICR, IBR, and pay plans. And not the repay model. And so that's a place where I feel like the negotiators were pretty clear on our preference. The department asked us for our preference. We stated our preference, and that's not reflected. And so my suggestion is that under family size, paragraph 2 be included to add EICR or ABC or BEAR or whatever, and that it be struck from the third one.
So Vanessa, are you able to capture that in a comment bubble?
I'm sorry, I missed that. Could you repeat that?
Sure. So we're looking at under, let's see, this is the definition of family size, and number 2, striking and adding EICR, and for paragraph 3, striking EICR, which would effectively treat married borrowers the same under the ICR, IBR, and pay-as-you-earn plan, where borrowers who are married but filed separately would not need to include their spouse's income.
Persis, does what Joe just shared in the chat capture that so that we could put that in a comment?
That's correct.
Perfect. Just thought that might help Vanessa, if we could just post that in a comment.
Yeah, that helped. Thank you.
And Michaela, go ahead.
I think that the confusion was, and just for folks who might be watching, that there's a lot of highlighted parts that come before this, but those highlighted parts are actually parts, from what I can tell, that are under other plans. Is that correct? And that we can't change them, but there is proposed changes in those. So the first change that we see to the new plan is under family size. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And thanks, Michaela. So if you guys, just so you refresh our memory, when we came out with language in session 2, it was all new language, because this is a proposed rewrite of all the IDR plans. Currently, they're all, pardon me?
The whole thing is new? I thought that these sections existed and we're just adding, and that's why we weren't allowed to touch the other plans.
So the concepts, okay, so there's 2 things. There's the technical revisions to all the IDR plans. So as they are right now, it's very redundant, like they each have their own section. Repay has its own section. It's redundant and it's confusing. So we said, let's put it all under one section, but the only thing that we're making substantive changes to is this new proposed plan. So in carrying forward the substantive changes of this proposed EICR plan, we're also making technical revisions to this whole section in the regulation, but we're not changing substantively any of the other IDR plans. Does that make sense? So right now it's a new section 209 rewrite, and we're putting all the IDR plans together, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then certain definitions apply to certain plans. Whereas currently we have, like, ICR has its own regulatory section. I'm sorry, I don't have we could probably pull it up if we really wanted to. So this is when we came in session 2, all this was new. And then the highlighted portions are only those things that have changed from 2 to 3. But all of this text, all of this proposed reg text is new reg text to reorder that whole IDR section. Does that make sense? And then the highlighted sections are only for 2 and 3. And then in making some of those revisions, some of these revisions don't pertain to the new plan. They're just technical revisions that we notice even from 2 to 3 to the existing plan.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm not a fan that, like, I get that they're just technical changes, but if the largest substantive change here is just to the cost of payment, monthly payments, right? Like, there's some other ones. So I guess making a whole new plan still sometimes doesn't really fully make sense in my brain when we could have just made those changes to an existing one. But I do understand. I just wanted to point that out for anyone watching, like, well, why aren't they talking about all this other thing? That would be the reason why we're not. And then back to the line items, I do agree with Persis on that, changing it. Changing family size, I mean, back to where, like, we were. Sorry.
All right. Anything else on family size from any committee members?
And Vanessa, indicate Daniel's and Michelle's, or sorry, I'm failing at speaking words today. Michaela's support for the proposal. Thank you.
All right, that's helpful too. As we're doing this in the chat, if you just want to officially denote your endorsement of suggestions. Vanessa, and I see Joe's as well. Vanessa, if you are ready on this piece, if you want to begin moving down the document. Yeah, Daniel.
Thanks. So I'm not sure if anyone has anything before this, but I have a question about the partial financial hardship definition, which is the bottom of page 2, which is right below where you are, Vanessa, on the screen. You were almost there. Nope, go back. Sorry, you were at new borrower right there. So this applies to IBR and pay only. Is there any reason that EICR would be excluded or included in terms of these definitions, or what's the? And I'm sorry for this, but what's the impact of partial financial hardship on further definitions?
All right, so we didn't include this as an eligibility criteria for the proposed EICR plan. So this is just carrying over and then further wordsmithing, because it is applicable to IBR and pay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So the next thing I would look to is poverty guidelines. So there was a comment made earlier, and I added a resource about poverty guidelines. And I would suggest the department include or consider this is on the next page, top of the next page, Vanessa. So if you go to page number 3, top of the next page, here we go. I would like to add that under poverty guidelines, there be a consideration of a cost of living allowance, and namely a cost of living allowance as referenced by the Department of Defense in consideration of military housing allowance are factors that are used as part of that adjustment. So if we can look at metros, this will, I think, address a concern that that Michaela and others have addressed about cost of living in high cost areas. So again, it would seem to be a resource published by another part of the federal government that could be used without a great deal of difficulty.
And Vanessa, feel free to come off of mute if you need any guidance from Daniel on how you'd like that captured.
Is there anything you want me to add to that comment bubble, Daniel, or is that fine? The cost of living.
Put the resource again in the chats.
Okay.
Great, thanks. And Vanessa, whenever you're ready, feel free to continue moving down the document.
I just want to add, I think to continue consistently with the discussion of, well, I'm not sure, this is something I would defer to the department on, but under partial financial hardship, like if we are mirroring the EICR plan to pay and IBR rather than repay, I don't know if you need to change to sub 2 on the next, just down on the next page, Vanessa, sorry. I don't know if you want to add a reference there, but like that's just like, that is one of the things we were walking through here with the marriage piece of this, trying to make sure that it was all consistent.
And then Daniel, I still see your hand up. Is that just a holdover? Do you want to contribute to what Bethany just said?
Sorry.
Maybe we could just put a note on that paragraph that says like conform to family size paragraphs 2 and 3, question mark.
And Persis, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, though, that it is not our intention to create a partial financial hardship requirement for this plan, correct? So we want to clarify for the purposes of family size, but not impose a partial financial hardship, right?
I think we're good with how it is. I don't know that we need to.
I withdraw it. We can delete this comment. I just wanted to make sure every time I see marriage and those words together, I get a little twitchy. But if Persis is comfortable with, we can delete it here. Sorry, Vanessa.
I think the important thing is that we're getting your ideas captured.
And if I can, I have now, Vanessa, the reference. So the reference is pasted into the chat for the poverty guidelines. It is a base of 8% for anyone in one of these metro areas. And then on top of that, an additional percentage based on the particular housing metros that are highlighted. I give this as an example. This is only one example of cost of living allowances, but again, the idea here being that this is specifically one that is provided by the federal government in virtue of military adjustments for military housing allowances.
Thank you, Daniel. And then Vanessa, thank you for capturing that. I think we are okay to move down the document a little bit more.
So I'm going to jump in, Brady, and raise my hand again, just because I feel like, you know, I can add. I can at least be the first one to say this. I won't be the last one to say this. I think you're going to hear near universal regard that we cannot limit this to undergrad loans only. So if you go to D2, I think, again, not that I can speak for all of my peer negotiators, but I think all of us are really struggling with this limitation. I would really encourage the department not just to think of graduate loans, but also plus borrowers, both grad plus and parent plus. And I imagine that we'll see a flurry of plus ones, or at least I would encourage my negotiators to add a flurry of plus ones so that we're clear that we all sort of sit in this space. I think this is going to be a major block to, thank you, the flurry is coming, a major block to consensus on the entire plan at this point.
Thank you, Daniel. Persis, I see your hand.
Yes, just giving a verbal +1 and a suggestion for the actual reg text to just strike the second paragraph under D and renumber the third paragraph. Number 2, I think that there's just no reason to, I think that the ICR is as inclusive as we can be in terms of the IDR plans, and I think we should mirror that.
Gotcha. And Vanessa, I appreciate you capturing it. That Persis, just so we're capturing that as a distinct idea, is how it's currently in the document. So, in terms of the suggestion, right? So
remove 2. Yeah, so I would remove 2 and add EICR or whatever the term is to paragraph 3.
I just raise one question though, Persis. Paragraph 3 requires direct plus loans to be consolidated if they're made to parents. So, and actually consolidated, I believe, along with student debt. So that would exclude parent plus borrowers who solely have parent plus loans from consideration. Is that an intention on your behalf, or is that an oversight?
It is not an oversight. It is, I 100% agree that I want to include parent plus borrowers to the fullest extent possible under the law. I recognize that the ICR statute and the IBR statutes both do explicitly exclude parent plus borrowers without the consolidation. So I believe that consolidation is the path forward for parent plus borrowers. And so that is not an oversight, but I do agree that it is 100% unfortunate.
Thanks. I just want to get that on record. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that exchange. Is there anything else as it relates to loans eligible to be repaid under this new plan, whose name is TBD? Under this section, or can we move down? Not seeing any hands. Vanessa, whenever you're ready, feel free to scroll down the document. Oh, Joe, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to point out that there was Persis, I think, or someone had proposed adding EICR to paragraph 3 under D, loans eligible to be repaid.
I thought that was captured, but Vanessa, would you mind scrolling up? Yeah, add EICR to paragraph.
Okay, I got it. Okay, thanks.
All right, not seeing any. Oh no, never mind. Persis, go ahead.
Sorry, I think, so this is in this place just to conform with the marriage proposal under E1, little I would be to add EICR to that section and remove it from further down in little 3, which I'm losing track of the formatting here, but basically we want to conform this to ensure that married borrowers are able to file separately and exclude their spouse.
Thank you, Vanessa, for capturing it, and thank you for the folks in the comment box. +1. And then Persis, it looks like that captures everything that you were mentioning in your comments, but I just want to make sure before we move on.
I believe that is correct.
Gotcha. Great.
A little hard to see with the way that the screen is formatted, but yes, that seems to.
And Vanessa, whenever you're finished with that comment, feel free to move down the document again. Doesn't look like there's any additional proposals here, so I think we can move to page 5. Bethany, go ahead.
So on page 5, if you scroll down to the large chunk of yellow highlighted at the bottom of the page, Vanessa. Yes. So as I think I explained earlier, I really think that the 200% of the applicable federal poverty guideline should be raised to 300. And I think Daniel made a proposal to raise it to 250 and to change the other one to 400. I would be okay with both of those changes, but I'd prefer to start this at 300. And then under 3 little I, Vanessa, where it says 300%, if you could change that to 400%. Thank you.
Gotcha. Seeing some +1s in the comments. So Daniel, I see your hand next.
Yeah, I'm in favor of that as well, Bethany. My only reason in using the 225 400 was to conform to the Pell Grant structures under the new SAI, Student Aid Index, and the ability for the department to use that as a sort of resting point in terms of why it's chosen those numbers. However, I would support the 300, 400 too, if possible. I'm open to either, but I think where we are is not acceptable to 200 to 300.
All right, so maybe Vanessa, if you just wouldn't mind, as a comment to the first, right? Exactly, yeah. Conform to eligibility.
Pell Grant SEI, Pell Grant SAI calculation.
Thank you. And Persis.
I just wanted to put in for the transcript that I submitted last night some research by a colleague of mine that showed that in a couple specific places in the country that the self-sufficiency standard was clearly at least 300, and so this provides evidence to support the use of raising it to 300% of federal poverty. And so I think that because we provided evidence, I don't think there's good evidence for 200. I think there's great evidence for 300. So thank you.
Thank you. And Vanessa, I do see some of the plus ones in chat, and there's enough that I just want to mention several. Great. All right, if the committee is ready, I think we can move to page 6. And I'd welcome any comments on issues in page 6. Daniel, go ahead.
Thank you. So I would draw your attention to number 4 toward the bottom of the page, Vanessa. Almost there we go. So I would replace the phrase "when a borrower has a zero payment" with "when a borrower has a payment that does not cover the interest assessed." And then, so that does not cover the interest assessed. And then I would assess, sorry, two double S's, interest assessed. And then I would change on the next line. Sorry, no, next line, go back up. Sorry, the very next line where it says with an amount equal to the amount of accrued interest, change accrued interest to accrued but unpaid. So we just need the addition of the word but, or the words but unpaid. So accrued interest becomes accrued but unpaid.
I see Bethany and Persis in the chat box indicating support. While that's being noted, anyone else have anything on page 6?
I'll just note for the record, there are a lot of +1s on this issue.
Right, yeah, Vanessa, wouldn't mind just noting that. Great. I believe we are ready for page 7. I would welcome any negotiator raise their hand on any topics covered on page 7 of the issue paper. Persis.
So I would like to cover the time to forgiveness being the big one. I've mentioned this before, but I really want to push hard on the idea that we can get cancellation faster for lower income borrowers. I don't actually have red line text handy, but I wanted to share, and I will email out momentarily, the idea of having a multiplier where you can give borrowers credit for each payment can count as more qualifying payments based upon their income, and this could be counted annually. Mathed out a multiplier that would allow you to do that so that the lowest income borrowers, folks who basically whose AGI as a function of the federal poverty level is, at 150 or below, have a multiplier of 4, so each payment would count as 4 for that year, and that if it persists for 5 years, that they would have cancellation after 5 years. I will send around the math on how what that would look like, and happy to also work on some language. But I think that is a way that we can achieve the department's stated goal of getting low-income borrowers cancellation faster. So if we can kind of conceptually put the idea of a multiplier for credit towards counting months of forgiveness in order to provide cancellation faster for lower income borrowers.
Got it. So Vanessa, under section K, forgiveness, you just want to add a comment there. Adding a multiplier. What was the person said? A multiplier to calculate months of forgiveness?
Right. So that a multiplier to count where each monthly payment would count as multiple qualifying payments towards forgiveness. And that multiplier would be based upon the borrower's AGI relative to the federal poverty level for that annual calculation.
Would you mind, just for Vanessa's benefit, popping that in the chat very briefly?
Yes.
Thank you. And I'm seeing some support of that in the chat. And then we'll come back to that while that's just getting typed up. Marjorie, do you want to add to that?
I do. So this suggestion is just that there's consistency between the plans for forgiveness. I know the department doesn't feel they could go lower than 20. And so just in that last line, I would say that it shouldn't be dependent on what your degrees are from, but it should just be 20 years if that's what the department is choosing to do. So instead of 25 at the bottom of section 1, 20.
Got it. And then
also,
I just want to.
Sorry, go ahead, Jennifer.
Sorry. Remember that's only that's the existing plan. That's ICR. So we're only making changes to the areas that you see EICR flagged.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry to confuse you, Marjorie. Remember, so this is again the rewrite where we're consolidating all the IDR plans into one section of the regulation. So that part is only applicable to ICR and repay. So we
okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, Vanessa, we could remove that comment, and then I'm seeing Persis just put the proposed change to forgiveness in chat. If you just want to copy that right in, with the mention of there's several negotiators in support, and then once we handle that, Michaela, I'll ask you to comment.
Yeah, farther down where it is flagged, do we have
I just want to make sure Vanessa has a chance to capture this.
It's oh, I see, yeah.
Yeah.
That I'm gonna just start calling it the BEAR plan. That the BEAR plan at 10 years to forgiveness, I think is reasonable. I feel like that's, or has some form of forgiveness after a certain amount of a certain amount of $0 payments, right? I know that there's this like big fear that lingers in the back of like people's minds that like, oh, if we say we'll forgive if they don't pay, then they'll just not work a job. But like, I like can pretty conclusively say that while there are some outliers that might do that, so like most people are not just choosing to live in poverty. Like people are like, oh, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm going to live in a really crappy apartment for the next 5 years so that maybe I can get $8,000 waived off my student loans, you know? Like that's just not how people are going to operate. So I think that 10 years is reasonable if we can't do it a different way to get it lower for folks.
Thanks, Daniel.
And I want to read into the record again what I typed in the chat and said earlier, which is I find it morally questionable, morally hazardous, to use Joe's term, that we're requiring our low-income, limited-income borrowers a longer period of time to forgiveness than we allow for our public service loan forgiveness candidates who are employed and earning presumably a livable wage. I really struggle with the logic around a 20-year time frame where we have a 10-year standard that is existent for public service loan forgiveness.
Thank you, Daniel. Is there any proposals people would like to make sure are entered into the record on page 7, or are we okay to move to page 8? Michaela, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't catch. I'm not sure if Daniel also said this, but it's not just PSLF. Like the main plan, right? Like the main default plan is a 10-year standard. Like it's a 10-year standard. You know, PSLF was like, oh, I guess this doesn't work for poor people, huh? Well, we'll give it to good poor people, right? We'll give it to poor people who are worthy of 10 years. But really that 10-year standard should apply to everyone.
All right, not seeing additional suggestions for our page 7. Vanessa, I think we are okay to move to page 8. And Daniel, I see your hand, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, this is just my technical amendment. So Vanessa, we moved from G to I. So I'm not sure, I think we need to renumber there. I'm not sure if there was an omission or what happened there. The other question is again, sorry. Oh, sorry, Bethany, I'm jumping. Is it okay if I? Okay. So the other question is, can we discuss retroactivity for periods of deferment forbearance that are being added? So I would strongly address or strongly suggest we address retroactivity by allowing, and maybe the guiding language is actually on page 7. But I guess actually this is a question, Jennifer. Is the intention, because the way it's written, I don't read this as necessarily prohibiting retroactivity. Was that the intention? Or what actually on the bottom of page 7 for the inclusion of the satisfaction of a monthly payment? Is that from the date of enactment forward or going backwards as well?
Remember, so this is a newly proposed plan, so, you know, everything applicable under these regs would become effective, you know, whenever we implement them.
Right, but the language on page 7 says for all IDR plans, a borrower satisfies a monthly payment or the equivalent by, and then it gives a series of options, including a series of deferment or forbearances. So we have existing borrowers under existing plans. So for those borrowers under existing plans, are you looking backwards at their periods of forbearance and deferment? I don't see anything here that would prohibit you from looking backwards. In fact, I don't see any exception to looking backwards. It's just reframes it. I'm just trying to make sure I understand the department's intention.
So these would apply prospectively once the regulations become effective.
And is that that doesn't seem to be regulatory? That's just an interpretation, because again, what we've said is this is now how you satisfy a monthly payment, not how you satisfy a monthly payment from this point forward. This is how a monthly payment is satisfied.
Right, but these won't applicable when these are effectuated, right? So I understand what you're saying. So would they, I mean, that's not, unless we make that explicit.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Then I would vote for making it explicit. I think it's important to allow, and this is my question, right? I think it's important then to say, this will be a retroactive benefit for borrowers who were under these deferments or forbearances. Again, I just remind us much of the public comment and addressing this particular issue, that people were misadvised, people were mischaracterized, and if we can't allow retroactivity, I understand the whole harmless position allows a way to resolve it, but that way to resolve it requires payment. So this would allow for, you know, for folks to also be held harmless if possible.
So I don't know that, well, we wouldn't be able to do that under that section, but I think the concern that you have will be addressed through our hold harmless procedures as proposed. Because they are retroactively going back and looking at those periods of deferment or forbearance where the borrower was placed and counting those as payments.
So
Does that address your concern?
yeah, except it will for ones that are things like post-active duty or unemployment or rehab. Where I'm struggling is the sort of generalized administrative forbearance. There, in a sense, how is the borrower supposed to document the calculation of what was required under an income-based repayment plan? It just adds so many hurdles to try to establish that, unless we're assuming a $0 value. And I'm struggling with how you would even document that. Maybe, I don't know, Purvis, do you have something to add on this issue, or is there something else?
Yeah, I think I might be just confused, and so maybe if I articulate my confusion, it will see if it settles your confusion. But the way that I'm reading this is that, so there's enumerated deferments and forbearances, and those, even if a borrower, let's say 5 years ago, had a unemployment deferment, right? That borrower is not going to have to go through the hold harmless period. That 5 years ago, that deferment will count currently when this is implemented, whatever that date may be, and they reach the other criteria that would get them to whatever months of qualifying payments. And so that the hold harmless period is only for the deferments and forbearances that are not enumerated in this list. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. That's helpful to me. I will also add that I would like to add a big L under little 4, that we also retroactively count any periods of forbearance that began before November 1st, 2022. I share the concern that's been enumerated a number of times that, like, looking backwards at forbearance times and the amount that borrowers would have paid is just going to be, frankly, impossible. I heard the department's concern about moral hazard, and that if we were to do this, that people would then just place their loans in forbearances for the entire period. I'm not by that concern, but I think certainly if we choose a date to look retroactively, and I chose November 1st, 2022, because presumably that's the date in which the department will publish final regs. A borrower is not going to game this.
2023.
Well, you would publish the final regs on November 1st, 2022 in order to be implemented in 2023. If I understand the APA council.
I'm sorry. I'm getting my years mixed up. You're correct.
Okay. So presumably somebody
effective by July 1st, 2023.
Right. And so presumably someone would not try to game the system based upon regs that do not yet exist, was my thinking in choosing that as the date. And so I think that the hold harmless period, at least if it's only going forward, and we're not talking about decades potentially of forbearances, but we may be talking more prospectively, one at a time, seems more reasonable to me. So that's, I would add that. I have other comments as well, but I think other folks might just have comments on the forbearances period.
All I'll say,
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Daniel.
I'll say is that, thank you, Persis, for that clarity. That addresses my concern about the retroactivity. So I don't need any further piece if that carries.
So just to be sure, the proposal is to go retroactive indefinitely. So apply it to all borrowers, regardless of when their loans were taken out.
That's correct. I would apply it, yes, any forbearance period that was taken out before the publication, basically before the publications of these final regs. And that would address the steering issues that Joe has mentioned a number of times.
Anything additional on this page, or are we okay to move to page number Persis?
Shockingly, I have more. So under paragraph 5 of the income, for an IBR plan and the defaulted borrowers, I would like to include language to make sure that payments which the borrower made while they were in.
If you wouldn't mind, just to interrupt, could you briefly guide Vanessa where you're directing your comments?
Okay, so it's the bottom of the, so it's the paragraph right below the hold harmless. Sorry, maybe I'm, there's 2 paragraphs on hold harmless. So go, so
are you on page 8 right now?
Yes.
Okay,
Or
before we do that, is it okay if I just, is there anything else on page 7 from anyone?
Oh, sorry, your pages just are numbering
No,
different than mine. That's why. Okay, go ahead.
But I think you're okay, because I think we're good to go to page 8 and feel free to direct Vanessa now.
Okay, so it's paragraph 5 for the IBR plan. Is that? I would just like to add language that would make sure that that payments that borrowers make while in default also count. And if they are in an amount that would be as much or if not more than their IBR payment would be. And so that's either voluntary or involuntary, and I'm happy to, well, I'm trying to copy and paste language into the chat right now unsuccessfully.
We'll wait for that, and I do see some +1s for that. So while we're waiting for that, anything else that anyone would like to add for page number 8? Oh, there it is. Bethany.
So I think Joe mentioned that he had some thoughts on the hold harmless provisions here, and I'd be very open to hearing them because I don't have a concrete suggestion, but I do think that specifically sub 6, sorry, Vanessa. I think that is, I have heard from several disability work community folks that this will be very hard to work through, that it is going to be very complicated for legal services folks to help them process these applications, that this is just going to be very burdensome on used to calling folks beneficiaries, not borrowers, but borrowers. And so I think we need to think if there is a way to simplify this. And I'm sorry, I don't have concrete language. This is not something that I particularly specialize in, but I wanted to express the concern there.
Before Joe and Persis, before we go to you, I just want to make sure that Vanessa, you're caught up. So are you good to entertain additional suggestions?
Bethany, was yours just simplifying paragraph 6? Is that what I heard?
If you would add a comment to paragraph 6, yes, and it is simplify the procedures for borrowers.
Persis, can I comment on paragraph 6, if that's all right? Do you mind? Okay, thank you. So I think if we are able to add the language that Persis added above as big letter L, then paragraph 6 becomes prospective rather than retrospective. And I think that's really important, right? So under paragraph L, or the letter L, if we're allowing any period prior to November 1, 2022 that was forbearance to count, then the hold harmless position becomes a move forward, and it gives students, borrowers, the opportunity to hold themselves harmless moving forward, which I think, Bethany, might address some of maybe of Joe's concern and others, because going backwards and trying to make repayment of periods that were years and years ago is going to be awfully difficult to administer. So just to add that, and thank you, Persis, for letting me step in.
Of course, Daniel. I also wanted to add one other thing to paragraph 6. And also, you know, again, I think the administrability is a real concern on the hold harmless. But if we are going to have a hold harmless, I would like to also, I think there's no good reason to only use forbearances. We have a lot of borrowers who also get steered into other payment plans that don't count towards cancellation, such as the graduated repayment plan, the extended plan. They get into the consolidated standard plan thinking that it's the regular plan. And so I think if we're going to have a hold harmless and the borrowers are going to have to prove that the payments were equivalent to the IDR payment or make it up, we should extend that to any of the plans. So I'm just going to, I would suggest putting after the second line, after the word section, comma, in the second line of paragraph of 6, this language to just include all the other plans as well.
And then I'm seeing the language for that in chat as well, Vanessa, if you just want to copy it from there. And then Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just very briefly, since Bethany mentioned it, I do have concerns about the administrability of the hold harmless section. You know, in an effort at good faith negotiation, I think if the department is willing to consider some kind of retroactive consideration of forbearances, whether the one that I sent to the department or the one that we've heard here today, I think that goes a long way towards assuaging my concerns, in part because, you know, borrowers who were steered into forbearance should not be made to jump through another administrative hoop. And I just don't think that's going to happen. I don't think people are going to be able to do that, particularly for those, as Daniel pointed out, those long past forbearances. I hear the department's concerns on moral hazard, and so, you know, I would be okay with hold harmless going forward. I do think that, you know, the department's earlier representations that they intend to police servicer conduct much more aggressively through FSA are very important here. Understand the department's position that those can't necessarily be addressed in the regulations, but would urge, again, whether my plan, whether what was put forward here today, whether what Daniel has talked about, you know, some kind of retroactive consideration of forbearances, guardrails, further guardrails can be put around those to indicate where, you know, we're getting at the borrowers that the department wants to address. So that's, you know, I don't have any more concrete ideas on administrability. It sounds like the department wants to address that through FSA, and you know, I think that the department should be given a chance to do that on a going forward basis.
Thanks, Joe. Michaela.
I don't know if I just like missed something. But where did the term moral hazard come from? And what does that mean? Like, what is this?
I'm the one that used it. You know, the department has expressed concerns in the past that people will just go into forbearance and then get their loans forgiven if like all forbearances are just open to consideration. So, you know, trying to address that concern. I don't necessarily share it, but for the reasons that you stated, Michaela. That's when I'm using it. That's where I'm referring to.
So you're saying is the idea that forbearance is generally limited to people who are, like, to be in a forbearance, you have to prove some type of like hardship or like reason you're in forbearance, right?
No, you can just go into a forbearance. And that's the problem, is it's quick for servicers to just say, yes, you can't make your payment. Okay, boom, you're in a forbearance.
Even when you make more money, you can call and be like, forbear me. And they'll be like, cool, you don't have to pay.
I believe that's the case, yes. And that's because that's so easy to administer. Servicers in the past would just, we've alleged in lawsuits that they just, as a policy, said, you got to keep your calls quick. Somebody calls in, the quickest thing you can do is shove them into a forbearance. And this is the problem. That's what forbearance steering fundamentally is.
I thought that forbearance steering was particularly along lower income folks. I know I see now Brian's on off mute, so maybe you can clarify, but that it had to do with because you qualified for financial hardship, you could go into forbearance, and so it's easier for low income folks to go into that versus income driven, and that that there had to be something there to qualify you for a forbearance. Before next, Brian, maybe?
Forbearance is available if a borrower calls and says they're having trouble making payments. So it can be for any reason. That's the discretionary forbearance. It's supposed to be for up to a year. There are other reasons in which forbearance is required. For example, while a borrower is submitting documentation for some other benefit under the program, they're required to the servicer puts the borrower in forbearance during that time. But general forbearance, yes, a borrower can get it just by saying, I'm having trouble making a payment, or I can't make a payment this month. So the concern from the department, so the concern from the department is that because of that, there is a possibility, and we have seen it in the past, that borrowers simply, I don't know the extent, but we have seen it in the past. Borrowers have simply gone into forbearance at their own choice for long periods of time. Joe and the AGs have shown that there are certainly circumstances in which servicers have encouraged that or pushed people into it, but in some cases, the borrower themselves chooses it.
But that's also, so when you're saying a long time, do you mean a year? That's could be a long time, or do you mean 10 years? How long are you considering a long time?
A borrower can voluntarily go into forbearance get it approved for up to a year. Then they have to come back and say, I still can't make payments, or, I run into another problem. The servicer is supposed to require more at that point, but not all servicers have in the past.
Is there any way to know how many people have done that for a prolonged period of time?
I don't know about I don't know about the statistics on that.
Okay, I just think with any system, there's always going to be somebody that gets around it, right? You can make all the regulations in the world. Somebody Absolutely. Is going to mess with it. There will always be someone to hustle the system. That's just how the universe works, right? I really just like the term moral hazard, because I think it's a moral hazard to make policies that assume that poor people are bad people. And I'm just really frustrated that we consider that oh, we have to make this policy based off of the moral hazard that someone could lie for 10 years and be in forbearance. Yeah, that's a possibility, but and maybe, then maybe we, I'll concede that maybe we don't include all of the forbearances, right? But I don't see why we wouldn't expand some of this, because we just can't make policies just assuming that people are bad people, because I just don't think that's the case. And I know some folks might find that highly optimistic, and that's fine, but I think there are ways in which we could create policy that finds balance.
Persis.
Yeah, I mean, I think I put it 10 million plus ones for Michaela there, that the evidence that we have, the clients that we've seen, that the attorneys in my community have seen, is that borrowers who would qualify for a $0 payment if someone had taken the time to properly advise them, get steered into forbearances. So I have seen borrowers in forbearances for 20 years when they would have qualified for a $0 payment that entire time. I think there is plenty of evidence Joe and the other attorneys general have lawsuits with plenty of evidence to show that it is not borrowers intentionally taking forbearances. And so I mean, I think frankly, the moral, to Michaela's point, the moral hazard is on the department not providing relief to people who have been harmed because they want to avoid one or two people gaming the system. And so I think that there is not credible evidence to say that there has been widespread use of forbearances to avoid making payments, but there is credible widespread evidence that servicers have utilized forbearances in order to shorten their call times, improve their bottom lines, and it has resulted in borrowers missing out on payments towards income during payment. And so I think we really do need to focus on making sure that we get those reliefs. I think doing it retroactively avoids any future problems, so long as the department actually follows through on its, holding servicers accountable, which it doesn't have a great history of doing. But, we can at least in good faith, believe that the department is taking steps to do so. But I don't believe that the evidence really suggests that borrowers are trying to game the system.
30
But we
seconds
do know that the department has failed to take steps to stop servicers from engaging in this behavior.
Thank you. And Michaela, I see your hand, but I do want to just really encourage committee members to try to direct comments towards these new proposals. So with that, Michaela, please go ahead.
Yeah, super quick, and I promise not to cry while trying to make a joke again, but like, I mean, this issue with forbearances is so bad that, again, there's been comedy segments on it. Hassan Minaj has, like, if you guys haven't watched it, it's on Netflix, has a whole thing on forbearance steering and Navient, and it wasn't just Navient, right? That this is a loan servicer issue. And so if we're not fixing that systematically, which we can't do with this, then we have to look at least providing relief from the symptoms and consequences of a broken system.
Bethany.
I just want to clarify, I'm mostly certain that Michaela's concerns and Persis' concerns are addressed by the big L provisions that we added. Or okay, Joe and Persis are nodding. I just want to explicitly say that is what everybody is worked up about and what we would like to see the department consider adding. Just to be very explicit about that.
Sure, thank you. Is there anything else on page 8 that you'd like the department to consider on the topic of IDR? If not, I think we can move to page 9. And Daniel, yeah, please.
So I just have a process question, which might inform my comment. The 12-month period that's referred to in number 5. So is that a rolling 12-month period regardless of when the borrower applies? So that if I apply in January, I have till next December or next January. If I apply in May, I have until next May. How does that process actually work? Does anyone on the call have an understanding of that?
Sorry, Daniel, where are you looking at? Oh, number 5.
Number 5, so 12-month period. The reason I asked Jennifer is if I apply in January, presumably you're using the income from the year before, because it won't have been calculated at that point what my new income is. So I'm just trying to get an understanding of, and maybe this is too much in the weeds, and I've been accused of being too much in the weeds before, but trying to get a better understanding of sort of what the time frame is for when, and what period income is being considered for this establishment of an income-based repayment.
I'm happy to try to just to say how that works in practice now.
Thank you.
That's helpful.
Thank you.
I mean, so right now it's an anniversary. So yeah, I think you're right. Like right now, if a borrower applies for an income during payment plan in May, they utilize their most recent tax return that they have available, and then they have to reapply again the following May. Same thing, or October, it'd be October. They create this anniversary date. And so that's how it's working in practice. And so but it does create this situation where sometimes there's a significant lag between. But borrowers do also, I don't think we've really talked much about the alternative documentation process, but they can, if their income is significantly different, utilize pay stubs or something else.
And is there, I mean, again, I understand the concept of income-based, the 12-month period, but I wonder about it. I'll have a comment when we get to page 10 about what happens if a borrower doesn't apply for recert. But I'm curious about 12 months. I can't imagine there's huge income variability year by year. And, you know, what's been the department's experience, and maybe this is too late to ask this question, given that we're in week 3, but what's been the department's experience in terms of variability for those who provide annual certification? And could we in fact do a 24-month period as opposed to a 12-month period? I understand, again, this may be too late now, but it just, you know, 12 months, every 12 months becomes a real hard lever to pull. And the stakes are so high that if you miss that 12-month certification, you know, it's very difficult for a borrower at that point.
I'm not seeing an immediate response. Vanessa, would you mind just capturing that question? And then I believe, Daniel, the 24-month proposal in a comment. Under number 5, yeah, the 12, yep, exactly. Oh, Brian, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just checking the statute. The statute in the ICR program does talk about the department establishing an annual repayment obligation of the borrower. So we've consistently interpreted that as requiring year by year. I understand your point about, you know, whether that's the most efficient way, but we've been pretty consistent on that, and I'm not sure I see a basis for changing it at this point.
Thanks, Brian. So Vanessa, I guess if you wouldn't mind removing that comment, and then Bethany, go ahead.
So I just want to echo Daniel on that point, because this is like all of the automation things we have discussed before. The reason to get rid of this or to think about changing it would be to simplify the process on borrowers. And we have talked extensively ad nauseum during these negotiations about how hard these programs are for people to navigate. And I cannot begin to tell you how difficult they are for me to navigate, let alone people who have other limitations. And so if there is any way to simplify or reduce the paperwork burden that we're placing on people, I think it's something that the department should be thinking about, as in every single aspect of not just these particular proposals that we're discussing right now, but all of the proposals. Sorry, I know that I say this every time this comes up, but just to reiterate it yet again.
Any final modifications the committee would like to capture on this and the remaining page 10? I know that Daniel, you mentioned you'd have something additional to add, but I just want to make sure. Page 9, any final proposals for consideration? Okay, we can go to page 10, and then Daniel, if you still have that, we can start that.
I do. So for little 3, given, and it may need to be called out as a separate piece, because right now EICR is placed with repay, but I would like to see a 6-month grace period. So if someone does not certify, that they're allowed 6 months under the existing payment plan before they're moved into a recalculation. So during that 6 months, they'd have a chance to catch up if the certification wasn't possible. I get and appreciate, to Bethany's point, and thank you for making it, that the Future Act and FAFSA simplification should make this process much easier for borrowers, because you should be able to pull the information directly from the IRS. But again, if possible, until that time, for someone who's not qualified, the ability for them to have a 6-month grace under the existing payment plan previously, an existing payment amount previously calculated, before they're moved into their new payment.
Thank you, Daniel. Are there any final proposals that we'd like to make sure are captured in the comment section? Michaela.
I just want to also check my understanding on this one. So what it's stating here, right, is about how long they're staying there. So if they have signed the waiver saying you can look into the IRS data and y'all get the whole Future Act thing handled, then that person will just be like auto stay in that plan so long as their tax returns say that they can. That is correct?
Any immediate response from anyone who can clarify?
Okay, and then, so then this part that Daniel's talking about is saying that if they haven't given that permission, right, then they have to do it 12 months, we proposed 24 months. And he's saying that he would like a grace period where if they don't do the paperwork within the 24 months, then they'd have an additional 6 months before they're moved. So it'd be a total of 30 months.
No, my point is, if we can't change to 24 because that's statutory, the 12-month period right now, there's a very, if you miss it by a day or a week, you're highly penalized. I'd like to give borrowers a period of time to be able to catch up, and that would be encompassed by giving them 6 months to catch up or get submitted if they're responsible for submitting paperwork.
Okay. And while the regs don't do, I know this is a sub-regulatory question, but like there are then going to be the processes of how that notification is going, right? Like, aren't there usually built-in kind of grace periods? At least there is. I gotta stop comparing everything to like state, like to benefits, but like for housing there is, right? Like when you're late, like you have a little bit of time, but then you have to do more paperwork and it's like a whole thing. But like there would be sub-regulatory provisions surrounding that kind of grace period too, right? Or is it like without the 6 months, it's like a hard stop, 12 months? It's a hard stop?
I believe so, right?
I mean, it will recalculate after, I think that it's a 10-day window at which right now we have a 10-day grace period after which the payments will reset to the 10-year standard amount or under repay, a very complicated calculated amount.
There's 30 seconds left on Michaela's time.
Okay.
All right, I don't want to take your time, Michaela.
No, that was all that I had. I appreciate you taking the time versus, but that all sounds really kind of gross. So that's all I got.
Thanks, Michaela. Persis, go ahead.
So I don't want to cut off the conversation about the recertification process if other folks have more, but I did, if we're able to go back, I wanted to make sure that we caught one particular point on page 6 with the interest.
If it's okay with you, is it okay if we can go back to page 6, but I just want to make sure, just for the purposes of note taking, that does anyone have anything else on recert, or if it's okay with you, Persis, anything on page 10, just so that can sort of, we can do it in 2 scrolls. But don't we'll definitely sure to capture that. Anything else on recertification or page 10? All right, so Vanessa, if you wouldn't mind, was it page 6, Persis, you said?
I believe it's on page 6, the treatment of the interest subsidy. And so I wanted to just verify, I know Daniel had made several suggestions beforehand. And yeah, so we scroll down just a little bit, that bottom of that page. During the periods, so Daniel had suggested that it's not just $0 payments, which I completely agree with. And so the other piece that I want to make sure we capture, that it's not just subsidized loans, that it is all loans in which interest is accruing. So that's just a technical piece that it occurred to me that I think we didn't discuss as we were on this page before.
Great, I'm seeing a few +1s in the chat. Okay, so thank you everyone for that. We have walked through the document and I appreciate all the suggested revisions. I think we want to give the department some time to thoroughly consider this. So what we would suggest is possibly returning to this tomorrow morning. So there is response time, but we're not putting it off to the end of the week. And then I think probably taking a 10-minute break and then picking back up with issue number 4, which would be PSLF. But before we do that, Michaela.
I have another question. You all should be lucky you're not in my class for school because the questions are incessant. But in regards to a statutory question for, I had heard that there had to be like, I can't remember the exact frame, but like conforming FEL language, not within this, but like if we didn't have a program that was like similar to that, then like we couldn't do it. Is that, maybe that's not like a now question, but I'm wondering if that's true. Like if it is the case that the department would have to have something for Fell too, outside of this, or if we can't go above and beyond what is in Fell.
I'll let Brian answer that.
Yeah. Generally, the terms, conditions, and benefits under Fell and direct loan are the same, except where Congress has specifically provided something different in direct loans than in Fell. So income contingent repayment, which is the basis for this new program, is only in direct loans. So we don't have to make changes in the Fell program regulations for this.
Cool. So there's not a direct statutory issue regarding Fell by not including them.
That's right.
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you again. Let's get back, let's say about 12 minutes, because again, my clock says 2:28 right now. So let's get back at 2:40 and pick up with the department outlining issue paper number 4, the PSLF application process. All right, welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that short break. We are about 45 minutes from our public comment session for today. So I'm going to ask anyone who's received confirmation to speak today to please log in a little bit early just so we can make sure everything works and we can get you in for 3 minutes of public comment. And thank you again to the committee for the discussion on IDR, which we will return to after the department's had a chance to look at the suggestions. With that, Jennifer, I think I can turn it over to you and Vanessa to walk us through issue paper number 4 on PSLF, which the fourth one would be improving the PSLF application process.
Okay, thank you, Brady. We can cue the reg text for, it's actually issues 4 and 5, public service loan forgiveness. We, as FCMS has mentioned before, we're going to take consensus check on each issue as we presented it in the issue paper, although you want to consider, the regulations in their entirety. So as I walk through, the way we split it up as a reminder, issue 4 was the PSLF application process, which actually comes in later in the regulations, and I'll point all this out as I go. I'll walk through the entirety of the regulations. And issue number 5, you'll recall, was a discussion regarding full-time employment and employer eligibility. So as we start off here under A, general, and B, definitions, we are actually starting with the full-time employment, issue number 5, just so it's clear in your head when we do consensus check later on. Issue number 5 is all inclusive from the beginning through all the definitions to the top of page 4, all the way up to qualifying repayment plan. And I'm just flagging that for everybody now, and then we'll go back up to page 1. So all the definitions, yep. Until right here. So qualifying repayment plan. So everything up to qualifying repayment plan, when we take the consensus check on issue 5, everything from page 4 and above will be that issue, and then everything process oriented will be qualifying repayment plans and everything thereafter. So we can go back to page 1, Vanessa, and we'll just start with the highlighted changes, which are the changes between sessions 2 and 3. A lot of minor technical changes to include just this wordsmithing around AmeriCorps service means service in a position approved by the Corporation for National Community Service, and then the statutory reference. So that's technical in nature. If we go down to employee or employed, means an individual to whom an organization issues an IRS form W-2 is number 1. That's existing. We had that before in session 2. And then we did some wordsmithing clarifications in session 2 for paragraph 2, which says an employee or employed means an individual who receives an IRS form W-2 from an organization that has contracted with a qualifying employer to provide payroll or similar services for the qualifying employer, and which provides the form W-2 under that contract. Again, to capture those contractual employees. Okay, scroll down. You'll notice at the top of page 2, in the definition of full-time, from the bottom of page 1, top of page 2, full-time means working in qualifying employment in 1 or more jobs, at least 30 hours per week, or at least 30 hours per week throughout a contractual employment period of at least 8 months in a 12-month period, such as teachers, in which case the bar is deemed to have worked full-time, or the equivalent of 30 hours per week as determined by multiplying each credit or contact hour taught per week by at least 3.35 in non-tenure track employment at an institution of higher education. And we added that clause at an institution of higher education for clarity. And we did accept the conversion factor as proposed by you all, the negotiators, and clarify that this can apply to contact hours as well. The middle of the page, Justin had some questions regarding how we define military service and who that applies to. So we wanted to clarify that when we say military service, that's already encompassed under federal employment. So this definition matters for employers that are not part of the armed forces or National Guard. And later on, we add that clarification under federal employees as well. So military service means providing service to or on behalf of members, veterans, or the families or survivors of members or veterans of the U.S. Armed Forces or the National Guard that is provided to a person because of the person's status in one of those groups. So hopefully that satisfies Justin and I believe Emily's concerns from session 2. Non-tenure track, we want to make sure that we cover all facets of that definition. So we just added, so we had adjunct, contingent, part-time, faculty, teachers, or lecturers who are paid solely for the credit hours they teach at institutions of higher education. Other school-based services means the provision of services to schools or students in a school or school-like setting that are not public education service. And just to provide some examples, we've added school health services and school nurse services, social work services in schools, and parent counseling and training. Okay. On top of page 3, public health, we added physicians to that list to include nurses, nurse practitioners, nurses in a clinical setting, those engaged in public service, healthcare practitioner occupations, healthcare support occupations, counselors, social workers, and other community and social service specialist occupations, as those terms are defined by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So making sure that we capture public health practitioners. Under the definition for public service, this is existing language in the highlight. We just moved it under here to clarify that service as a member of the U.S. Congress is not qualifying public service employment for purposes of this section. So that's just existing language that we just moved under here. Public service for individuals with disabilities means services. That was just a technical correction, performed to assist individuals with disabilities that is provided to a person because of the person's status as an individual with a disability. We changed from 65 to 62, public service for the elderly. Again, same thing regarding the person's status as an individual of that age. Public education, we included the clause including teaching to the provision of educational enrichment and or support, just to make that explicit. And I see a typo, an errant 0 in front of students. That's not intentional. Yes, and then here qualifying, now we're getting into qualifying employer. And this is where, by adding the clause, including the U.S. Armed Forces and the National Guard, just to make that explicit regarding federal, state, local, tribal government employment. Okay, top of page 4. This is our definition for qualifying employer. So we have 1, which I just talked about, which is government employment, 2, the nonprofit. And so for 3, we went back and forth, and what we have is an organization that 1, provides a public service as defined in this section, attested to by the employer on a form approved by the secretary, and 2, is not a business organized for profit, a labor union, or a partisan political organization. So we talked about this in session 2. We went back and forth with this several times internally prior to our initial proposal. We discussed this. We have landed here because I know, Michaela, you talked about this earlier, but in terms of administering this program and drawing lines, I think it gets very, as we've noted in our discussions in this negotiation, it's very difficult to draw lines in terms of, you know, businesses organized for profit and including them in this program and identifying those that are providing a public service. So we landed with the attestation by the employer on a form provided by the secretary to the exclusion of a business organized for profit, a labor union or a partisan political organization. Heather, I see your hand. Did you want to bear with me? I think I can get through this whole proposed language and then we'll go to questions because I think that works.
I was going to suggest, yeah, if you wouldn't mind running through. And then Heather, I think you're off camera right now. So if you just want to come on camera with the preparation, that I'll call on you once we're through the document.
Okay, I'll keep going here. Qualifying repayment plan, that's just a technical change to the new proposed IDR plan or proposed IDR rewritten section 209. That's all there is on this page, page 5, monthly payments. So this is just clarification. There's nothing really new substantively here. We just added paying at least the full schedule amount due for a monthly payment under the qualifying repayment plan under 1. Under 3, we wanted to clarify for a borrower on an IDR plan under the new proposed section because someone on the 10-year standard does not have a recertification date. So just making that explicit. Under 4 is the 10-year standard repayment plan under 208B and clarifying the lump sum or monthly payments that are qualifying payments under standard repayment plan. Moving on to page 6. Again, this is we are conforming this with our proposed language under the IDR plan we just went over, and this is to include forbearances, the rehab training program deferment, post-active duty student deferment, AmeriCorps, National Guard duty, DOD, and administrative forbearance or mandatory administrative forbearances. We will count all of those deferments and forbearances enumerated here as monthly payments in alignment with our proposed language in IDR. And just of note, these also include national emergency and also while processing paperwork such as servicing transfers. So all those will count now where they didn't count before. So that is included here. Page 7. Okay. 6. Okay. And this is following on from, again, the same stem about monthly payments. Be considered to have made monthly payments, you have to 6, be employed full-time with a qualifying employer as defined in this section at any point during the month for which the payment is credited. And this was meant to be responsive to the public comment that we heard about tying the date of payment too closely to the date of employment. So we just wanted to ensure that it's at any point during the month for which the payment is credited. Also under 3, if a borrower consolidates one or more direct loan into a direct consul loan, the payments the borrower made on the direct loan prior to consolidating and that met the criteria in subsection C2 through Romanet 1 through 3 will count as qualifying payments on the direct consolidation loan. Okay, so that is another, you know, we're counting payments prior to consolidation. So I just want to flag that because that's I know we talked a lot about it, and so we are counting those as qualifying payments on the direct consolidation loan. Those are payments made prior to consolidating. Okay. We can scroll down to the bottom of page 7, subsection E, application process. So after the 120 payments are made for the eligible loan for which loan forgiveness is requested, a borrower can request forgiveness on a form provided by the secretary. If the secretary has sufficient information to determine the borrower's qualifying employer and length of employment, the secretary informs the borrower when the borrower is eligible for forgiveness. So this is that automation piece. The secretary does not have, if the secretary does not have sufficient information to make determination of the borrower's eligibility for forgiveness, the borrower must provide information about the borrower's employment and employer in a form approved by the secretary. At the secretary's, okay, sorry, that's 2, 3, and then 4, if the borrower is unable to secure a certification of employment from a qualifying employer, those are just clarifying changes. The secretary may determine the borrower's qualifying employment or payments based on other documentation provided by the borrower at the secretary's request. 5, the secretary may request reasonable additional documentation pertaining to the borrower's employer employment before providing a determination. And then 6, the secretary may substantiate an employer's attestation of information provided on the form in clause Romanet 2 based on a review of information about the employer. So that's new as well. So again, that's taking the proactive stance on the side of the department to be able to substantiate that attestation. And then under 8, regarding if we find that the borrower does not meet eligibility requirements for loan forgiveness, it's the resumption of collections, just clarifying that the secretary does not capitalize any interest accrued and not paid during this period. Right, and I'm sorry, a G is the part of automation. I said earlier. G, subsection G, application required. Again, this is the automated piece whenever the secretary has information, for example, about military service or from DOD or federal employment, the secretary will forgive the loan without an application. And then we've kept that language open-ended for any kind of future data that we're able to obtain going forward. Reconsideration. Okay, so within 90 days, we've gone over this before, just kind of minor wordsmithing and the highlight clarification. Receiving a notice of denial of forgiveness, the borrower may request that the secretary reconsider whether the borrower's employer or any payment qualifies for forgiveness. And then nothing changed in what the secretary considers with regard to reconsideration and any relevant evidence that is obtained by the secretary. Just stated more simply, and to kind of remove all the language about reasonably obtainable or currently, just obtained by the secretary. Page 9. Again, this is in conformance with what we have under IDR. We talked a lot about forbearance steering. This is our proposed solution to that, and that is for any period in which a borrower postponed monthly payments under deferment or forbearance and was employed full-time at a qualifying employer as defined in this section, but was in a deferment or forbearance status besides those listed in subsection C2. 5, the borrower may obtain credit toward forgiveness as defined in paragraph D for any months in which the borrower makes an additional payment equal to or greater than the amount they would have paid at that time on a qualifying repayment plan, and B, otherwise qualified for a $0 payment on an income-driven repayment plan under 34 CFR. And again, that's the proposed language that we just went over on the new IDR plan. So again, this provides a path for borrowers to get credit for past periods of deferment or forbearance, excuse me, by making necessary payments. And it also can include periods of time at $0 payment. And then that last section is the reporting piece from the guarantee agency. And just as a reminder, on the very last page, on page 10, we had inserted before section 2 language from the language to amend the report to the secretary regarding the borrower's enrollment and loan status information to include details related to the loans or borrower's deferments, forbearances, repayment plans, delinquency, and contact information. So that is my review of the changes we made between sessions 2 and 3. Just to review, we landed on clarifying a lot of these definitions for public service, clarifying the exclusion regarding for-profit organizations, labor unions, partisan political organizations. Again, monthly payments, opening up monthly payments to include periods of deferment and forbearance. Those are all included here. Including payments that happen prior to consolidation of the loan, if one or more of the loans is a direct consolidation loan. Making some tweaks in terms of application process. Putting conforming language regarding hold harmless procedures to address the issue of forbearance standing. So that's what I have, and I'll let Heather speak.
Yeah, Heather, please.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, Brady. I'd like to say a couple of things here. I'd like to thank the department for their hard work on this issue, and particularly to acknowledge that you have proposed a formal process to request reconsideration of decisions for public service loan forgiveness. I think that's significant and of use to borrowers. I think that you have removed some of the unnecessary application requirements in a way that is significant and important. I recognize also that you have expressed that you're limited by the statute and to forgiving direct loans. I acknowledge that that's the case after this limited waiver period. Also acknowledge that it's statutorily preempted that you not be able to forgive loans that are in a default status. I do want to note that in my view, although the department has expressed disagreement with this, there is in fact statutory authority to count payments made on defaulted loans. In my view, it is true that you cannot forgive loans that are in a default status. But in my view, again, you could count payments on loans in a default status, certainly at least those that were made voluntarily under a rehabilitation agreement. But I acknowledge that you have declined to agree with my position on that. I appreciate that this proposal includes counting payments on direct loans even after consolidation into direct. I was prepared to recognize that you thought that the HEROES authority was required in order to allow counting on FFEL loans after those FFEL loans are consolidated in direct. But I now see, based on the earlier conversation about income-driven repayment, that perhaps the department is willing to consider whether you do in fact have authority. And I certainly agree with PERSIS's analysis in that respect. So to the extent that you'll be counting payments on FFEL loans after consolidation towards income-driven forgiveness, I would assert you should also do so on public service loan forgiveness. And then just, before I talk about employment, just want to reiterate that income-driven repayment is the path to forgiveness under public service loan forgiveness. And so it's the rules surrounding income-driven repayment that are the most important thing in this instance, and they are much of what the administrative problems have been. I would say that the department has many times said you were interested in simplification. Your current proposal, in fact, makes things more complicated rather than more simple. But I do acknowledge that in order to administer things, sometimes you need some amount of detail in order for it to be precise. I would urge you to specifically acknowledge that payment counting should not be any more strict under PSLF than it is under IDR. And I would want you to clarify specifically that you intend for payments made under the new income contingent plan to count towards PSLF. And that, in my view, is required by the PSLF statute that, in fact, refers specifically to income contingent repayment. The major issues, I think, that I'm very disappointed that the department has so far declined to adopt are the definitions of employer-employed, the definition of public service, and the definition of qualifying employer, because those, in fact, narrow the eligible employment under this program from where it was before we considered these regulations. It has always previously been the case that people have to work for nonprofits, they have to be hired and paid directly by the organizations, and that the department has always looked at the organizations. And so, to be clear, even though there is this very, very long and now much better fleshed out definition section of public services, people doing those public services will not qualify for forgiveness under this provision unless they are directly employed by a nonprofit organization. So it seems to me that what the department has instead done is create a much more complicated way of excluding nonprofit organizations from participation in this program. And I think that there is a way to draw a line, and you've done it already, in that only borrowers who complete 10 years of public service will ever qualify for PSLF. They must make 120 payments driven by their income. And so that narrows the class of eligible borrowers very significantly to begin with. And so I would encourage the department to consider this committee's feedback with regard to the definitions that are outstanding for employee, employed, public service, and qualifying employer.
Thank you, Heather. Anyone else?
Heidi, I just want to make a clarifying point regarding the counting the payments. It's for PSLF, it doesn't apply to FFEL loans. So just to be very clear that this, this benefit that we're providing under the PSLF waiver is a HEROES benefit that we're providing. We're waiving that statutory requirement. So if you have underlying FFEL loans and you've made payments on them, they will only count under the temporary waiver. This, that provision that I just reviewed, yeah, it has to be an outstanding, it's direct loans, direct consolidation loans. At least one of those loans are direct consolidation loans. And then you've made payments on direct loans prior to that, prior to consolidating, they will count so long as the payments were made toward direct loans previous to the consolidation. So that is a finer but important point. If you have underlying FFEL loans, please avail yourself of the PSLF waiver. Again, we really appreciated this committee's ideas, and particularly Heather's guidance on a lot of these issues. We couldn't find a way to draw the lines as cleanly in terms of employer eligibility to be able to administer the program without having to go on a bar by bar basis. And that is why we've elected this attestation and landed where we are for PSLF. However, it is an expansion. It's an expansion in terms of what can be counted in terms of monthly payments. It's an expansion to be ensure that we include contractual employees. It's changing the full-time employment definition to ensure that it's more encompassing of the work that public service employees actually do. So we certainly view it as an expansion and improvement of the existing regulatory language.
Justin, go ahead.
Thanks, Brady. And I'll probably circle back here, but I just want to ask a quick follow-up question to a point that Heather made. And it's something that I was actually curious about too when it comes to FFEL, because it seems, there might very well be a basis for this. It might be a statutory restriction, or they're dealt with differently in statute, and that somehow constrains the department. But and my read might be wrong too. So all those things, laid out. I'm curious. It seems like the department's considering payments made on FFEL loans, previous payments made on those loans before consolidation in the context of the most recent IDR language we have. And I'm wondering, is that different here when we're looking at PSLF, or is my read wrong? Maybe I've misinterpreted Heather's point altogether, but that's what came to my mind when we were looking at IDR text today. I saw that provision, and then when Heather made the point here. So is there a reason IDR and PSLF are treating FFEL pre-consolidation different?
Brian, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Yes, the PSLF statute is quite specific, that says the borrower must have made 120 monthly payments on the eligible federal direct loan after October 1, 2007. So that's why it's limited to the direct loans. The department did use its waiver authority under the HEROES Act earlier this year to allow a special period in which we will count certain payments made on FFEL loans if borrowers consolidate into direct loan, but that's under our waiver authority under the HEROES Act, and we can't make permanent changes to the program based on it.
Understood. Thanks.
Persis, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the issue of excluding employers that are organized for profit. This is something that is not required by the statute, as I understand it, and I think that it impacts in particular public service workers who are low income and low income borrowers of color in particular. And so keeping this exclusion that's not required by the statute, I think harms some of the most vulnerable public service workers who are not choosing employers based upon whether or not they are nonprofit or they're, their companies. They're just trying to do their work, and they're trying to survive. And I think this points out especially why it's important to go back to income during payment, that if you're not going to include these, folks in PSLF, that's why we need to have a more generous cancellation period under income during payment, because there are lots of people who we know need to get cancellation sooner and should under general public policy. And so I think that they should be included here, and also that, this points to why income during payment needs to be more generous.
Thanks, Persis. Daniel.
So I have a technical question, and it may be a correction. Can I ask Jennifer, is it possible for Vanessa to put the document back up and for us to look at page 7? Thank you, Vanessa. So on page 7, you're right. You're perfect. You were right there. Under section 3, the call out is to subsection C2 1 to 3, but subsection C2 continues through the new bullet new bullet VI 6, which you listed right above this. So I'm wondering why the department's ignoring 4, 5, and 6. So 4 is under standard repayment, those periods. 5 is deferment forbearance, And 6 would be where your payment comes in at a time where you're not employed necessarily, but you are within the month. So Jennifer, I'm wondering if that was an oversight or if there's an intentionality behind leaving only 1 through 3 there.
So Daniel, I don't know what we would have done without your eagle eyes throughout this rulemaking, but we do appreciate it. I mean, it's very, as you know, condensed time frame, and we're making changes and we're trying to control the versions. And I think that is an oversight. That's supposed to apply to, through 5.
Yeah, new bullet 6, I would suggest.
I'm sorry, 6.
Yeah.
And that might be because if you look at the highlight, those are new, and so it just got left off.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa, for capturing that. And I just want to recognize that Suzanne is at the table on behalf of state regulators. So with that, Bethany, please go ahead.
So I want to go back to a public comment we received very, very, very early on in the negotiation, I think during the first week, by a young man who provides services to people with disabilities. And he says he works for a private employer and he can't get counted. This is the case with many folks who work for staffing agencies. This is also the case for folks who work for on a contract basis. I know that the implication for the department is that this will capture them. I have to share Heather's concerns that I don't think it does. And it certainly doesn't capture folks who work for a staffing agency. And again, this was something I raised repeatedly as something that we really should be including here. So I'm going to raise it again because I think that these are, I mean, by definition, the entire regs, the statute look to provide services to people with disabilities. We're trying to capture that population as broadly as we can. I'd love to hear why the department thinks staffing agencies shouldn't be counting. And again, I really want to go back to, as we discussed in the second session and the first session, like, I understand it's an extra burden on the department, but allowing for employees to self-certify gives much more control over this process to employees rather than to employers. And I think just given many of the challenges that folks may have with getting employers to sign off on these forms, I do think we're going to face a lot of challenges there. And so I think the department in many ways would be better served to allow employees to certify. But I will pause at this point and see if you have any thoughts on the staffing agency issue.
Immediate response from the department?
No, I mean, nothing new other than, I mean, yes, we shared those concerns going into this, and this was, an issue that Brian can attest to that the department explored ad nauseum during when we first rolled out PSLF, and we shared those concerns. You're right, the statute doesn't require that restriction, and we try to explore a way that we could administer this program responsibly. And we landed where we landed with employer attestation rather than the certification by the borrower. That was, this is just where we landed, and it's I guess it's safe to characterize it as not just an additional burden, but it's not, we haven't found a way to implement it in a way if we were to privilege the employee, and we're not comfortable with relying on the borrower attestation.
Can I ask what makes you comfortable with relying on the employer attestation rather than the borrower? Is there a particular way you guys can verify with employers rather than employees? Because to my mind, it's kind of a crapshoot between both. As Michaela said earlier, you're going to have fraud one way or the other in the system, and I can guarantee you're going to have bad actor employers who are going to be certifying for folks. I mean, I'm sure Joe's going to start seeing those cases. We certainly see it in I think every sector that I've seen. So I tend to default to wanting to support the borrowers as much as we can, and I think that that will make it a lot easier for them. So if there's a reason to default to one or the other, to my mind, the default should be going always to the borrower. But that may just be a philosophical difference with the department.
And I think you're right. I think that there are, risks and drawbacks and, benefits of doing it one way or another. However, I mean, the employer has to attest to we know that the employer has to attest to the number of hours anyway, and the fact that the individual is employed. So just having that extra verification, two entities, the individual borrower and the employer, we feel like is a responsible stewardship of the program. We can't just leave it up to the individual borrower.
Jerry, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I just want to go back to the importance of a good IDR for just a second. We've heard from people who are in spousal situations, and we've heard from people who would have both qualified for PSLF, or one had qualified for PSLF if they were able to get out of that situation of the spousal loan. So I just want to make sure that, either add it as a note back on the IDR side of things, but I think that there's a really big missed opportunity to correct that burden. And thank you so much for the change in the adjunct language. I just have to say that for much of my constituency who are teaching one class at 5 different institutions, there will be appreciation for that new language.
Thanks, Jerry. Marjorie, so Jay, I see your hand. Is it okay just because we're running up on that 3:30 mark? We'll just pick up with you tomorrow. So Marjorie, I think you're going to be our last comment before public comment. Oh, you're muted right now, Marjorie, sorry.
Sorry. So just really quickly, and again, this is another question about qualifying employers. So we also heard from several folks from Texas and California, and knowing that that's not simply an individual issue, right? We're basically eliminating public health professionals from the entire state. Is it not possible to include specific language with regard to those 2 states in this regulatory language? And I'm not an expert in the area, but I think that sort of struck me as a significant issue that needs addressing. And because we put public health work in here, I think it really would be beneficial to have some language in there if we can. But again, I'm not familiar with sort of statute and law around, why those 2 places are different and why they're treated differently by the department.
Marjorie, thank you for raising that. That issue has come up frequently. We talked about it session 2. We took that under a lot of consideration. We were, we thought that was an important issue. That's not something that we're treating those populations differently. It's a function of their state and their state law that has that exclusion for those employees. So ultimately, that language is not in the draft before you. We had gone back and forth with it, and ultimately, it's not included here. So we hope that a statutory remedy will address that issue going forward.
Okay. So we're just about at 3:30. A few minor announcements just running into tomorrow. So we're going to pick up, as we always do, at 10 a.m. tomorrow. We're going to proceed with this topic and hope to stick to the proposed agenda as much as we can, but noting that there might be a modification to that just due to the outstanding IDR issue paper that we need to return to. And then, of course, the Prison Education Subcommittee will be presenting their work and recommendations to the full committee at 11 a.m. tomorrow. So with that, I think we can begin public comment. Just a quick note for those who are going to be joining us for public comment. If you're joining us on the live stream, try to turn that off as you're admitted. Otherwise, we do get a bit of a feedback when you're admitted. So if you're signed up for public comment, just exit out of that live stream so we don't get that echo, and we can get to your comment right away. So with that, Kayla or Cindy, I'm sorry, who are we admitting first?
We are admitting Samantha Norris, and she is from the Return Peace Corps volunteer.
Ms. Norris, can you hear us?
Yes, can you all hear me?
We can. You have 3 minutes for public comment, beginning when you start speaking.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Samantha Norris, and I am a returned Peace Corps volunteer. In 2011, 2 years after completing my master's degree in social work, I chose to join the Peace Corps. I had no idea how much that decision would change my life and transform the lens through which I viewed the world. I was sent to the Dominican Republic, where I worked alongside youth and community leaders, learned Spanish, danced bachata, and developed lifelong friendships with the folks in my community. Like so many other Peace Corps volunteers, the research I had done and the advice I had received through my federal loan servicer and the Peace Corps itself led me to believe that deferment of my student loans was my only option. I figured there was no way I'd be able to make any monthly payments as a volunteer. It was not until after I completed my service when I was made aware that I could have been counting my months of Peace Corps service towards public service loan forgiveness had I been enrolled in an income-based plan while overseas. I felt angry, deceived, and disappointed. Upon finishing my Peace Corps service, I hopped onto a plane to another unfamiliar place, New York City, where I've called home for the past 8 years. If it wasn't for the Dominican community here, I probably wouldn't have made it. I was immediately welcomed into the home of a family connection from my community in the Dominican Republic, where I stayed until I was able to stand on my own 2 feet. I started to work as a social worker with New York's immigrant youth and families and continue to do so. My work has been greatly informed by my time in the Dominican Republic, like the thousands of returned Peace Corps volunteers who dedicate their lives to working with marginalized communities across various sectors. And like so many others across the nation, my student loan debt only continues to grow. I've been enrolled in public service loan forgiveness since I began work in the nonprofit sector. It was incredibly disappointing to learn that among the many positive changes that the waiver program would be implementing, recognition of Peace Corps service was not one of them. The reality is that most Peace Corps volunteers since 2007 were never properly counseled on their public service loan forgiveness options prior to their service. In fact, many, like myself, were misled to believe that loan deferment was their only option. I asked that the Department of Education provide returned Peace Corps volunteers with immediate retroactive relief. This would include returned volunteers in the temporary waiver period and credit all volunteers with qualifying months of public service loan forgiveness for any months of service in which federal student loans were placed into deferment or forbearance status, like that provided to active military members with deferred loans. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Norris, for your comment.
Okay, Brady, next we have Heather Martin, again from the Return Peace Corps volunteer.
Good afternoon, Ms. Martin. Can you hear us?
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine. You have 3 minutes for public comment, beginning whenever you begin speaking.
Thank you. I haven't been involved in the rest of the meeting, but I just wanted to share my personal experience with the Public Student Loan Forgiveness Program and my Peace Corps service. So I served in Peace Corps 2010 to 2012. And since 2013, I've made payments to my federal direct subsidized and unsubsidized loans in the amounts of $430 to $693 each month, not including my private loans as well. So since 2013, despite paying nearly $40,000 into my federal loans, my loan balance has increased nearly $20,000. So I'm really frustrated with the high interest rates that are allowed on federal subsidized and unsubsidized loans, and it's just been impossible to pay them off and catch up with it. I'm also frustrated that my Peace Corps service was not included in the public student loan forgiveness program. When I served, I think I did know about the program, and it very much influenced my decision to go into Peace Corps and then get a position in federal service as well. But during service, I knew there was no way that I could make a payment. I was making around $250 a month that went completely toward my expenses in the country. At the time, I talked with Peace Corps staff, and all of the guidance that they gave us was to defer the loans. So I had no idea that there was an option to pay $0 at all at the time. Even when I came back, I didn't find out until later, despite research and speaking with the Peace Corps at the time. Then when I started full-time with the federal government in 2013, I was able to buy back my Peace Corps service towards retirement, but wasn't able to do anything with the public student loan forgiveness program. I, did reach out to the program. I reached out to my loan servicers, and, there was really nothing I can do. And I didn't even know, I know that you changed the rules for previous consolidation. Like for about 2 or 3 years, I was making payments on
30 seconds.
A loan that was not part of the program. So yeah, I'm just sharing my experience, and even though I make a really good salary, I struggle to make ends meet because of all of these loan payments. And if my Peace Corps service were counted into the public student loan forgiveness program while I was on deferment, I would be eligible for forgiveness right now. So it would make a huge impact for so many people.
It is 3 minutes.
Including myself, who currently serve our country and have served in Peace Corps. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment.
Okay, Brady, next time I am admitting Megan Gilkey representing themselves.
Hi, Ms. Goki, can you hear us? Not sure if they're connected, but do you want to admit the
It says she's joining, so there she is.
Hi, Ms. Goki, can you hear us? Oh, you're muted right now. There you go.
Can you hear me? Thank you very much.
Yep, you have 3 minutes for public comment.
Thank you. I'll try to make this brief. My name is Megan Goki. I served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Guatemala from 2010 to 2012. I lived in an indigenous village in the mountains, which was a 6-hour bus ride from the in-country Peace Corps office. Starting my service in 2010, I had less than $30,000 in educational debt. Starting my service, I knew that if I served, it would count as 2 years of service towards the ultimate goal of loan forgiveness after 10 years. Peace Corps advised us, volunteers, to defer payments. Peace Corps went so far as to include in our Guatemala welcome book that we obtain and submit loan deferment paperwork before our arrival in country. I trusted that advice. I trusted that the same government I was serving would be the same government that ultimately forgave my loans. Because I trusted the government's advice, my 2 years in Peace Corps does not count towards any time of the 10-year loan forgiveness. The Public Service Loan Forgiveness announced in October of this year that military members could count their service into their calculation of their 10 years, regardless of whether their loans were deferred or not. I wholeheartedly support that waiver. Women and men of the armed services support a necessary and strenuous service. And so do Peace Corps volunteers. During my service alone, I helped educate Indigenous Guatemalans on important topics like water purification. I personally, with no help from the government, raised $10,000 in order to build 64 infrastructure projects in the villages I worked where there were none. Beyond what Peace Corps volunteers provide as a service to our host countries, we provide a public service to the United States. We are an invaluable diplomatic arm for the US. We foster relationships in areas of the world that the United States would never reach without us. We come back to the US sharing culture of our host countries. We literally promote world peace. I acted diplomatically. I worked hard. I followed the rules. I did what Peace Corps told me to do, yet here I am begging, not to be compensated, but begging that my 2 years I volunteered for our country counts towards my loan forgiveness. Following the same advice from Peace Corps, continuing into my career, I worked for 2 years at the Neighborhood Defender Service of Harlem as a caseworker before going to law school to become a public defender. Knowing my loans would be high and knowing my passion to do public service work does not pay accordingly, I worked 3 part-time jobs during law school. I've worked for 6 years in public interest, but because of the faulty advice from Peace Corps itself, I only have 2 years counted towards my forgiveness. I live in a large city in New York as a public defender, make $65,000 a year, and have over $250,000 in debt. I'm asking that my public service be counted as such. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your comment.
Okay, Brady, next we are admitting Jesus Abaraka, I believe, who is a veteran.
Mr. Abarca, can you hear us? You're muted right now, by the way.
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm sorry.
Great, no, it's no problem. You have 3 minutes for public comment, beginning when you start speaking.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jesus Abarca. I am a veteran, currently trying to attend Lincoln Tech in New Jersey, Mahwah. My classmate and myself, we've both been enrolled under a false pretense that the school accepts the GI Bill under that program. When we first signed up, obviously, the main question we all ask is, do they accept the GI Bill? Because for obvious reasons, that's our financial support for school. So the school was quick to enroll us. They heard veteran and they were very ready to start paperwork with us. They took our DD-214 and they had told us that they did not need our certificate of eligibility because they called the VA and said that we were good, that they just called to find out how many days we have left or months we have remaining on our GI Bill, see if we were eligible for the program. And that was it. That's all they needed. They didn't need the actual certificate of eligibility. So moving forward from there, prior to school, usually the VA gives us a stipend for books. It's usually between $100 or $500. The school told us to not worry about that we would receive that when classes start. So that alone was like 2 major red flags for me. And then it just keeps going and piling on. Come a whole month into school, we still haven't started receiving our benefits. We received no BAH, no word from the VA, nothing. And the school told us that it was delayed, that they're being audited, to just patiently wait. So they ended up cutting us a stipend check around like 2.5 months just to kind of keep us afloat from me telling them how much I've been financially struggling. And it went on and on. It ended up leading up to 5 months. Currently where we're at now, 5-6 months. But after that, we had they had brought us in to write out a loan to basically, because at this point I was very behind on my bills. I was behind on everything. I was wasting a lot of money just trying to get to the school. And it was money I couldn't keep up. I'm sorry, what was that?
You have 30 seconds remaining, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. So the school made us take out a loan. I only saw $4,700 of that loan, but obviously, surprise, surprise, they had taken out a subsidized loan of $3,500 and a $6,000 loan in unsubsidized loan. So the total was $9,500 that I didn't even know of. I only saw $4,701. And
that's 3 minutes. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Thank you for your comment.
Brady, next we have Isaiah Seaborn representing themselves.
Isaiah, can you hear us? Hi, Mr. Seaborn. You just have to come off of mute, and then you have 3 minutes for public comment. Are you able to hear us? You just have to come off of mute, and then you have 3 minutes.
Yes, hello.
Great. Go right ahead with your public comment.
Hello, my name is Isaiah Thorne. To start and thank everyone. Story is this: my dreams against me by the Art Institute of Colorado to ruin future dreams. In 2005, I pursued a degree at the Art Institute of Colorado to make video games. I was targeted after researching on Google. I was targeted by the Art Institute of Colorado to come and check out how I could create video games easily. My parents and I visited the Art Institute in hopes of finding out if my talents could pursue a bachelor's degree of media of arts and I was told, hey, you can do this. The degree itself would be $80,000, and both my parents and I specifically asked questions of the recruiter. You know, since I didn't have an art background, could I be successful in this degree? And they promised me, oh yeah, you'll do great. You need to go ahead and get locked in, hurry up and sign in now so tuition doesn't go up, and get locked in, and we'll talk about getting you an internship early. This was just merely a ploy that the Art Institute used to inflate their numbers. $40,000 in to the degree, I was pulled out of a class and told directly that I would never ever work in the video game industry. So I had two options: quit and spend the $40,000 that I had already, had, and waste that. And I could not transfer my credits because the Art Institute had now become non-transferable. Their accreditation, or I could fall back into something else, such as video production. I did that, and now I'm over $200,000 in student loan debt. 2 days before I graduated, I got so sick from trying to pass these classes, I passed out, and they wanted to fail me because I was not able to attend a class. After appealing, they told me that I was not worthy of graduating from the Art Institute, and that I should enjoy my bill.
Seconds.
Later, after appealing, I was able to resubmit the same work and finally graduate. But again, $200,000 in, I've not been able to purchase a home. I have two children and my wife. Our credit is ruined, and my life has all been ruined basically because I went to the Art Institute of Colorado. I wanted to share the story with you all because student loans and the way that I was
Mr. Seaborn, that's 3 minutes on your comments.
tricked into believing that I was going to get a good job. It's ruined my life. It really has ruined my life, and really changed the destination for my kids.
Thank you for your comment.
Brady, I am admitting Carol Hicks to the meeting.
Ms. Hicks, are you able to hear us?
Oops,
you're-
it went to, never mind, Chris and Massengill while I try to get Carolyn connected.
I apologize. Kirsten, if you just want to come off of mute, you have 3 minutes for public comment.
Okay, thank you everybody for this time. My name is Krista Massengill, and I do apologize ahead of time. I attended Brooks Institute of Photography back from 2004 to 2007. I attended that school because I had a passion for photography. I was encouraged, and in hindsight, it turns out it was more of they just wanted to get enrollment and they wanted to get numbers. Again, apologies. Without getting into too much of the detail, because I'm still kind of working through everything, I've been paying off these loans since 2000, even before then. I don't see any end in sight. I just finished my personal loan, or not personal loan, but it was my unsubsidized loan in October of last year. we still have the Parent Plus loan that is my mom's, which we celebrated that we had it under $100,000 before my son was born last year. We put off a lot of life events because of stuff like that. And at one point we just decided, you know what, we need to live our lives. Since we've had the loans are under federal forbearance, it has relieved so much stress off of me. I never had the chance to like go to a therapist or talk to anybody about anxiety, but it's something that I've lived with and just kind of coped with because I have these loans. For a long time, I worked 3 jobs. I made sure that I never missed a loan. I did what I had to do to make payments, not just on mine, but on my Parent Plus loan for my mom. That's something that I've worked hard for, and it wasn't until we actually had the forbearance that I had a chance to breathe. And that sigh, like that little breath that I've had and still have right now, has given me the chance to actually focus on what's important in life, which is my son, who we finally had last year during the pandemic of all times. So we've had a lot of life events, a lot of positive stuff. But what I'm getting at is that a lot of us still have these loans that just do not go away. It infringes on our lives. It causes stress. It causes anxiety. And I'm one person that cannot control my emotions, unfortunately, when it comes to this, because it has been a part of my life for so long. And I don't see it ever going away. I really, really hope that anybody that was a part of the Brooks Institute, the Sweet versus Cordova, previously Sweet versus Lost, does get their student loans forgiven, because we ended up with a degree that has served us for no reason. We've all are in debt for a degree that has zero purpose, and we still have to pay this back. Is what I'm thinking very pessimistically, because that's the only way to go. There is no positivity out of this tunnel. Although I really hope that I'm wrong, because I don't want this to be a part of my life for the rest of my life. And I'm sorry, that's it. Thank you for your time, and thank you for everybody who served. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. We appreciate it.
Okay, Brady, I am now admitting Carolyn Hicks, and she's a veteran.
Good afternoon, Ms. Hicks. Can you hear us?
Says she's still joining.
While she's joining, can I make just a quick comment? Just because I just want to recognize how much emotional labor goes into all of the folks that testify. And I know sometimes because it's on a 3-minute timeline, we just like bust through them, but I think someone just needed to acknowledge and really give that thank you.
All right, thank you, Michaela. While she tries to join, we are going to move on to Adrian Figueroa representing themselves.
Oh, it looks like we have both. So if it's okay, Mr. Figueroa, I see you're in the meeting, but you'll just be right after Ms. Hicks. So Ms. Hicks, if you can hear me.
Yeah, I'm not showing that she has any audio.
Okay, so here, why don't we do this? So Adrian, if you're ready to go, you have 3 minutes for public comment while we work on Ms. Hicks's audio.
Okay, thank you. My name is Adrian Figueroa, and I applied to the Bar of Defense on August 12th, 2016 at 11:30 a.m. because I'm approximately $25,000 in debt with school loans that were accrued while attending the Cordon Bleu institution. It's in my opinion that at the time I enrolled at Le Cordon Bleu, I was coerced in, excuse me, I was coerced in this predicament with a promise of becoming a chef, which in reality, I have been unable to obtain a position as a chef upon graduation. Each class is only 6 weeks long, and that really doesn't give you any time to retain any type of information at all. Excuse me. Any student could just pass simply by showing up, and I was promised a chef's average of 50,000 to 80,000 as soon as I graduated. And that was false information, because the only job I was ever able to obtain was a line cook or a prep cook, which beginning salary was at the time, I believe, $9 an hour. And anybody who walked off the street can get that type of job. So it was unfair that anybody who walked off the street can get that type of job. But at the same time, I have a certificate. I graduated. because of the unfair practices by the Cordon Bleu, which they admitted to in a class action lawsuit against Career Education. Basically, they had to pay back all the students. I would have never enrolled otherwise or committed to the program and incurred debts if I'm unable to repay or get this discharge. You know, in 2015, Le Cordon Bleu announced it was closing all 16 of its culinary schools across the country and would no longer enroll any new students. I strongly believe that CEC and Le Cordon Bleu, by closing all of the schools, confirmed the deceptive practices that were in play at the time I enrolled in the school. Because of these loans, I have been denied employment opportunities at several banks, including Metro Credit Union, where I was the #1 candidate for a brand new position they created. And due to not being able to pay my loans, consistently, because I was trying to survive, they denied me the position at that job. This has impacted my credit. I've been denied for renting apartments. I've been denied several things because of this loan. I heard somebody say something, I'm not sure.
I was just letting you have about 20 seconds left for your public comment.
Oh, okay. You know, this has impacted my credit. I've been denied several things, even furniture. When I did decide to get it, when I was able to get an apartment, I've been denied furniture. So I've been left to sleep on floors with blankets. So, you know, I really appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to my story today.
Thank you. We appreciate your public comment.
Thank you.
Okay, Brady, I show that Carolyn is there and she's unmuted herself. I think she's ready to go, but she is off camera.
Right, Ms. Hicks, you have 3 minutes for public comment. Still not getting anything. If we want to admit
I'm gonna go ahead and admit Cynthia Johnson representing themselves.
Ms. Johnson, are you able to hear us? You want to try with the next one, Cindy?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and admit Alicia Cole Cabot. And we have confirmed that she has logged in under Brett. So that is what her the name will show. And they are representing themselves.
Good afternoon. Can you hear us? Hi, can you hear us?
Yes.
Great. You have 3 minutes for public comment.
Okay. It's a little past. It's 2 minutes past my start time. Is that still okay? I still get 2 minutes. Okay. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Alicia Brete Cole-Cabot. I'm a student debtor seeking forgiveness, student loan forgiveness. I graduated with a BA from Brooks Institute of Photography in September of 2007. Myself and over 900 former students have been victims by this school's misconduct, deceitful recruiting tactics, and fraudulent practices. I was a young, naive student who entrusted that the school would look out for my best interest. They vastly inflated the amount of loans they said I needed to borrow to cover school and living costs. They falsely promised me a high-paying job upon completion, state-of-the-art vocational training, and a fulfilling career. In actuality, upon completion, I was left with over 3 times the amount of debt they claimed I would accumulate, totaling over $300,000. The reality is my life has been worse than before I attended Brooks. I would never have attended if I was aware of such appalling effects on my life. My student debt was so great. The financial difficulty was a primary reason for my divorce in 2017. Between my husband, who was also a Brooks graduate, and myself, over 70% of our monthly income went to student loan payments. When times were really tough, I had to put my loans on deferment. After paying down my loans on time for over 7 years, they exceeded the initial amount that I had borrowed due to forbearance and deferments. My income as a professional photographer averaged $30,000, putting me below poverty level. I sometimes balanced 3 jobs as a single mother because I couldn't make it just as a photographer. I have submitted a borrower's defense to repayment application after 14 years of hardships due to high student debt. I am hoping to get my life back through student loan forgiveness.
Thank you very much for your comment.
Thank you for hearing me out. Are you wanting me to just log out immediately, or?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Thank you.
All right, is Carolyn dialing in? I'll try her one more time.
I don't see her in the meeting.
I just readmitted her.
Okay.
I'm still having difficulty. I'm going to go ahead and admit the last person who has logged in, and that is Caitlin Jackson Roll, criminal defense practice at Bronx Defenders.
Good afternoon, Caitlin. Can you hear us?
Please admitted her.
If you just want to turn off the live stream so you don't get that feedback, but otherwise you have 3 minutes for our final public comment of the day.
Yes, thank you. I'm muting the live stream right now. I'm currently a supervising attorney at Bronx Defenders. I'm a public defender. I've been doing that for about 11 years. I am hoping to encourage the committee to consider allowing borrowers like myself to either pay retroactively for periods of either administrative or hardship forbearance, and alternatively to allow borrowers like myself to receive credit for forbearances when our payments would have been either 0 or close to 0. My loans are incredibly high, as are nearly every attorney I know who went into public interest. Unfortunately, there is no, if what you want to do is work defending people who are very low income, who the government has charged with crimes like I do, there's no way to do that without a law degree. I went to state schools, and my loans at this point are still close to $300,000. They are so much more than what I borrowed. And when I was early in my career and making less money a year than what my 1 year of law school cost, I was put into a hardship deferment when my loans would have been $0 a month. There is no reason that anyone would make that choice but for being misled. Nobody would choose to go into forbearance when the payments would have been $0. But my servicer misled me, and I spent 12 months 12 months doing incredibly hard work for very little money in a very expensive place. And I won't get credit for any of that when I wouldn't have had to pay a dime. I just was misled. Additionally, I've had other periods. I've worked at a couple of different public defenders. And every time I have shifted jobs, it would take 3-4 months of administrative forbearance for my loans to be shifted. And each time I was told, if you don't take this forbearance, then you have to pay the full amount that's not income adjusted. At one point, I believe that was a little over $200,000. I mean, $2,000 a month, which was essentially my entire monthly income. So basically, I very much hope that the committee will consider changing those rules. It's critical that people are able to go into immigration law, housing law, public defense, areas of law that require very, very high loans, but pay very, very little. And I hope you'll consider letting us have some of those months back.
Thank you for your public comment. And thank you to all of the public commenters. We really, really do appreciate everyone taking the time to share their story with the committee. We are a few minutes over, but we will pick up at 10 a.m. tomorrow. And thank you so much for all your hard work today.